Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. Two big announcements, and we're glad our television audience is with us, and that is two wins against the Internal Revenue Service. First, in the United States District Court, we beat the IRS on a Freedom of Information Act request that we wanted to get information on, obviously. Taxpayers have the right to do that. The IRS refused to hand over the documents. We went to federal court, and a judge issued a order compelling the IRS to disclose the documents. That was good news. But even more significantly, I think, is the IRS was proposing at the end of last year to do a scenario where they were going to actually ask nonprofit organizations, like the networks you're watching right now, to have to ask you for your Social Security number to give a donation over $250. They said, well, it would be voluntary, but we all know what voluntary means with the IRS. Well, we went to work on that. I am happy to report that the regulation has now been withdrawn by the Internal Revenue Service. I'm going to read it to you. It says this very clearly: the notice of proposed rulemaking published in 2015 is withdrawn. We won. This is huge. Jordan, this is the actual document that the IRS has filed saying they are withdrawing the proposed rulemaking, asking for this taxpayer information. Again, here it is. This is a big win, but the IRS was, again, with this administration, overstepping its bounds.
This is not a situation where the IRS is putting this along. So they're not just pausing this. They have fully withdrawn this proposed rule. There was major backlash, over 38,000 private comments, a letter signed by 215 charitable organizations, warning the IRS, basically, they're not set up to protect this kind of private information, this data like Social Security numbers. And again, the ACLJ filing a letter of protest against this rule. It is a real victory. And I think this all ties back to the pressure put on the IRS during the targeting scandal. Because of that, people are not afraid to speak out against the IRS. Yep. And then we see these positive results.
All right, folks, we're fighting back on the IRS, but you know what we want to do? Abolish the IRS as we know it. And we're getting big support for that. We had this big win. We've got a petition up at ACLJ.org. If you want to join us in this fight against the IRS, go to ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. We're winning. We're going to continue to win, but this was a big one. Two big ones already. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. You're adding your name to a petition. Very simple. Stop the IRS abuse. Abolish the IRS as we know it. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. Back with more in a moment.
The more we learn about the IRS scandal, the worse it gets. The American Center for Law and Justice is in federal court challenging the IRS scheme, targeting conservative groups simply because of their beliefs. Add to that an IRS that misuses millions of dollars of taxpayer funds, frivolous spending, unchecked and undocumented expenditures. All of that adds up to an IRS out of control. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
I really think the IRS is institutionally incapable of self-correcting. So the agency right now is in complete meltdown, in my view.
It's clear the IRS is incapable of doing its job. That's why the ACLJ believes it's time to implement real tax reform and end the IRS. Tell Congress to abolish the IRS. Add your name to our petition now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or you can add your name online, aclj.org.
Big win, two wins actually, and let me go over them again. Department of Treasury revoking their decision to ask for what they called voluntary compliance, which is nothing voluntary with the IRS. So you donated to the ACLJ, as so many of you did generously, that we would have to then ask for your Social Security number. Now, we filed a protest on this, and the reaction on Capitol Hill was also very strong. I mean, no one could believe that in the midst of this IRS targeting scandal that the IRS would actually do this. And the administration would put this forward.
In an environment where the IRS has proven themselves completely untrustworthy of sensitive information, essentially what they were trying to do is build a database of Social Security numbers, because you laid this out very well, right, Jay. Yes, it would have been the groups that were collecting the letter, but then they would have been required to send that to the IRS, and if they didn't do that, the people that made the donations would have had to self-report and self-track. That is something that donors don't like to do. They won't do it, so they just won't make the donation in the first place. So these Social Security numbers were going to end up in a database at the IRS. This was just a sneaky way of accomplishing that.
I'm going to play back for you. It's just worth doing. This is Lois Lerner's so-called apology from 2 years ago.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title. That was wrong. The IRS would like to apologize for that.
The IRS would like to apologize for that. Would they like to apologize for the fact that the ACLJ secured a huge victory in federal court against the IRS because they wouldn't comply with the Freedom of Information Act request? The IRS want to apologize for asking for your Social Security number when you make a donate, not on your tax return. I'm talking about when you make a donation to a church or a religious group or a nonprofit or a hospital, whatever it might be. We have to ask you for your Social Security number. That's what they were proposing. Well, that didn't happen. So a big win, 2 big wins against the IRS. Good way to start the year. We've got a lot of comments coming in and calls coming in as well. Logan, what's next?
Sure, we had a comment come in just now from Greg on Facebook who said, Jay, I've read your book, Undemocratic, and I see this as further confirmation of your premise. So how can we change all of this? The fate of our country is at stake.
I think that you have to abolish the IRS as we know it as an entity. I don't think, and I worked for the IRS. My first job out of law school was the Office of Chief Counsel, Internal Revenue Service. And let me tell you this, I think that the institution is not capable of self-correcting. I think that's the real problem here. And Jordan, there's been a lot of people calling for this politically. We've been saying it for years. When we got into that IRS litigation, we knew what, I mean, I worked for them, and it was not that way when I was there. That was a long time. It was 35 years ago when I was first out of law school, so it's been a long time. But this idea that the IRS even thought they could do that shows you how dangerous it is. But again, I think the solution here is abolish the IRS as we know it, period.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact is that the IRS has shown that it is in a situation where they keep pressing and pressing. So you would think after the IRS targeting scandal, they would not be pushing for new regulations that affect all charitable organizations and this reporting of Social Security numbers, which everyone knows would have a very negative impact. People would get freaked out and they would be scared to donate because they think, okay, I'm now more likelihood of identity theft, all of these problems, giving more information to the government as if the government, federal government, doesn't have enough information on all of us already. And so ultimately here, what we have seen is though the IRS continues to be so bold, as we've said, that we don't believe that they're institutionally capable of self-correcting and there needs to be a complete overhaul of our tax system, including the agency that runs our tax system, and get up to speed with the times and the technology available. And the second place, it's a big victory because it shows that once we put that pressure, took them to court, fought back, that the IRS is not acting quite as strong as they used to. It used to be the agency that you didn't mess with. I mean, that it was the most concerning of all government agencies to be involved with. I'd say even to an extent greater than the FBI, the DEA, and other organizations. The IRS is what scared people the most, and they learned if we all join together, they are still part of the government. They respond to the people. They have to respond to the people, and that's exactly what we saw here.
I have a fun one that just came in and just said, yes, now it seems like charity is now considered worse than terrorism. There's more checkups on charity than there are on potential terrorists. That's an interesting point of view. It definitely a bit tongue-in-cheek, but interesting.
Yeah, interesting because we said yesterday in the broadcast, remember those the snapback provisions on the sanctions? That was a Treasury proposal, right, Dan? I mean, that was a Treasury proposal that the government stopped doing even though the Treasury was going to put it in place.
Yeah, it was a regulation promulgated out of the Treasury Department because of existing regulations in violation of UN sanctions, and it's pretty clear what happened, Jay. Those regulations got to a certain point. The White House noticed them, and they said, we've got to shut that down, so they worked through the State Department to make sure, in so-called interagency conversations, that those regulations went away.
So the Treasury Department, which is the IRS, will want your Social Security number. That's why that comment was very interesting. Want your Social Security number, but, and this is what's so interesting here, the scenario that we have right now, and this is the reality, is they wanted your Social Security number, but they wouldn't let Treasury put in the snapback provisions that they had in place to do exactly what? Go after the sanctions that the law required against Iran. So, yeah, they're more concerned about getting your taxpayer, our Social Security numbers in a database than they are about stopping terrorism. That's a pretty scary thought, but I understand exactly why the comment came in.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Jonathan is calling from Hillsborough, Kansas on line 4. Jonathan, welcome to JSEC. You're live. A question that we're getting a lot right now on social as well.
Hey, Jonathan, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, thank you.
Yep.
My question is, what is the reasoning behind the IRS targeting nonprofit organizations?
Well, they're targeting nonprofit organizations. The targeting scandal was because they didn't like the politics, as they called it, or the advocacy positions of various nonprofits. They only targeted conservative groups, pro-life groups, some of the Tea Party groups. But they were asking the pro-life groups who you were praying with. They wanted to know who you were in contact with. They wanted a conservative educational organization to give them a list of the students' names. And these were teenage students. And this is what the IRS thought they could get. Now, we fought back on all that and won. I mean, they changed those. They stopped asking for that information. This particular thing was called a substantiation requirement for contributions over $249.99. And this was what they wanted to call compliance. So that if you donated $250 to the ACLJ, I had to then come back and ask you for your Social Security number. Now, is that not absurd? I mean, the rationale for that is called harassment. Jordan, you could call it a lot of things, but harassment is really what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly right. And that is what that's what this would be too, this collecting of Social Security numbers. I think it's a kind of a backdoor harassment. At first, it would affect the charitable organizations greatly. The impact it would have on not only the fear of now making a donation means giving away more of this data, which people are already always concerned about their Social Security number, and knowing that that's going to the IRS and all that the IRS has been mired in and what they stand for. And then second, on top of that, it's not just the backdoor impact, it's also this, again, power grab by the IRS for information that they should not require in the case of charitable contributions. They are part of the federal government. If they believe that there's anything going on, if there's anything wrong, they've got all of the information necessary. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen to make charitable contributions. Even you can donate to an American nonprofit if you're listening to this broadcast anywhere in the world. The only time there's restrictions is when it comes to federal elections, some state laws on elections, and that has to do with a whole different branch of government.
All right.
So ultimately, another attempt at a power grab that would have caused intimidation by the IRS.
So one of the things we laid out in our letter to the IRS was concern about identity theft at the IRS. We put this, just this year, hackers, this was talking about 2015, hackers access sensitive employee data at the Federal Office of Personnel Management and the Central Intelligence Agency and the IRS as well. Two sophisticated organizations with the resources to protect identity theft, and that information was hacked. One of my associates in my office in Atlanta, when I was with the IRS, said he got a notice from OPM, Office of Personnel Management, that his information, which mine was too, they probably just didn't have my current address, was compromised. Yeah. So this is giving the IRS. They can't even keep information confidential. Why in the world would you give them additional Social Security data? And that's I know a lot of those comments are coming.
Yeah, one of the comments came in and just said, Jay, they thought they could just do this, but and do you think it was for future intrusions on our liberties?
Yes, I do. I think it was. Look, I think, Than, what you're saying is they wanted additional information in the database.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. They wanted to know who groups' donors are so that they can promulgate additional regulations in the future. So they went after this way of doing it. But, Jay, we just need to say this. This is the perfect example of why you engage the process at every stage. If you read our letter, it's very complicated. It's very in the weeds. That's why we engage it, though, because you can shut these things down before they get out the door.
Look, folks, when you ask, do the petitions, do the letters, does it matter? Yeah, it matters because we just had a huge win. I'm going to read you what the IRS said. Withdrawal of notice of proposed ruling. The Internal Revenue Service has withdrawn that proposal on the Social Security numbers. That's called a huge win. Hey, folks, we want to continue our efforts. We had this big win against the IRS. We want to continue. We've got momentum on our side now. So we've got this petition that's up that we want you to add your name to. Hundreds of thousands of people have. Abolish the IRS as we know it. You know how you do that? Just go to aclj.org or call 1-877-989-2255. There's a number and the email address and the web address is on the screen, but let me give it to you again. aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255 to sign that petition to take a stand with us. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
The more we learn about the IRS scandal, the worse it gets. The American Center for Law and Justice is in federal court challenging the IRS scheme targeting conservative groups simply because of their beliefs. Add to that an IRS that misuses millions of dollars of taxpayer funds, frivolous spending, unchecked and undocumented expenditures. All of that adds up to an IRS out of control. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
I really think the IRS is institutionally incapable of self-correcting. So the agency right now is in complete meltdown, in my view.
It's clear the IRS is incapable of doing its job. That's why the ACLJ believes it's time to implement real tax reform and end the IRS. Tell Congress to abolish the IRS. Add your name to our petition now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or you can add your name online, aclj.org.
Our band put together a great song called Undemocratic. We've been playing it in some of the breaks. We are now going to play you the full version of this lyric video. It was based on our book, Undemocratic, but the lyrics really speak to this great win we just had today against the IRS. So you'll want to take a listen to this. I like that song. It grows on, it's a 1960-70 rocker. It's called Undemocratic. It's an original by the J. Sekulow Band, available on iTunes, I believe.
Yeah,
and
iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you get digital music, it's available there.
And don't forget the podcast that we were in the top 100.
That's right. Yep, we were in the top 2 yesterday. I mean, it was crazy, and we still are in the top podcast slots. It's really amazing. Thanks.
Which you
to all
said
of you.
people are noticing in the tech
people
industry.
are noticing the tech industry. I've got tweets from random people. I'm doing an interview on a random tech website, possibly with someone with Apple, to explain how things like this happen, how their algorithms work to feature different things. Should be great. I'll let you know if that does happen. Give us a call now, 1-800-684-3110. Janice is calling from Denver, Colorado. You're on the air, Janice.
Hey, Janice.
Hi, Jay.
Hey.
Thanks for taking my call. Sure. See, I was just wondering, I don't know if I've ever heard whatever happened with Lois Lerner and what were her repercussions.
She was basically resigned. She was not prosecuted. In my view, she got away with it, but we beat the IRS back. We got the tax exemptions. This is Eric Holder in a press conference when all this broke. You listen to his outrage, and he's the one who, by the way, brought up this could be criminal. It was Eric Holder that said it. Take a listen.
I have ordered an investigation to be begun. The FBI is coordinating with the Justice Department to see if any laws were broken in connection with those matters related to the IRS. Those were, I think, as everyone can agree, if not criminal, they were certainly outrageous and unacceptable.
Here was the problem. As we did the case, you know what we found out? Guess who was in collusion with the IRS? The FBI and the Department of Justice. So, Janice, nothing happened to Lois Lerner, but our clients did get their tax exempt status, 95% of them, and we are continuing to litigate against them in federal court. And we just won on the regulatory issue on this week, and we beat the IRS in New Hampshire on a Freedom of Information Act request. We're exposing the IRS for what they've done, and we're going to continue to put that into play.
Let's go back to the phones. Barbara's calling from Flat Rock, North Carolina, and this ties into a comment we actually just had on Periscope. Someone said when they realized they couldn't get the full hour of JSECULO Live, they downloaded Periscope immediately and found us there. So, Barbara, welcome to JSECULO Live.
Hi, Barbara.
Oh, hi. And I am so thankful I have discovered that I can hear you on Facebook.
Yeah, great.
And the thing is, every day is a learning experience because I hear things I'm shocked because I don't hear about it around here. So I'm so glad that you're on top of things.
So you're watching us, Barbara, on Facebook?
Yes.
Did you listen to the broadcast before you heard us on Facebook, or did you just find us on Facebook?
No, I did not hear you before.
That's great.
No, I did not. I just, one day it just showed up on my Facebook.
Great.
Jay Sekulow was live, and it's like, wow.
Okay, great. Well, your question's a good one. How did you find out about the new IRS rule? And that's because we've got a big office in Washington, D.C., headed by a very talented guy named Than Bennett, who's our Director of Governmental Affairs. And Than, we're on to, we look for these things, actually.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we exist, Jay, because the average American doesn't have the time or the interest to dig through the Federal Register and read all of the regulations that are promulgated. There's a lot of them. I mean, let me just tell the caller. This one was IRS Regulation 138344-13. I would guess nobody listening to this show read that regulation, but we did, and we engaged, filed 4 pages of comments.
And Periscope so they can actually see it. I'm going to show it to our audience that's on our website right now. This is the actual, there it is on Facebook and Periscope. For our audience on TV, there it is. Give them that number again, Than. What's the number of the reg?
IRS Reg -138344-13.
But we found it, Barbara, because we went to work on this. So we're thrilled that you were listening to us on Facebook, and we're going to send you a copy of our brand new book as well, Undemocratic. So we're going to send that out to you.
Yeah, we do have comments coming in. A lot of people are chimed in because of what's happening on Facebook and Periscope, and obviously people are downloading the ACLJ app right now. That's great. All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Chiquita, who's calling from Oregon on line 3. Chiquita, welcome to JSECULO Live.
You are on the air.
Yes, I wanted to say thank you, and I'd like to know if there's anything else that we, the public, can do to assist you in helping us out like you're doing.
Well, here's the thing. On the IRS, I think, matter successfully resolved. People spoke out, and we were getting it resolved. And, Jordan, this goes to the point that we've been talking, that when you speak, we find these regulations, as Than said, let me get that number. This was regulation number 138334-13. But we found out about it. We went to work on it. And because we're able to use our media this way effectively, Jordan, we're able to get this resolved. And I'm looking at the order. I had the first order and then this one. This is my favorite one. The notice of proposed rulemaking is withdrawn. So the IRS, Chiquita, gave up. And, Jordan, that's how you win these things.
Yeah, you push back, and they have to take public comments. There's thousands of these regulations, but they do have to take the public comments. It's very rare for them to get this many, and from this wide variety of groups across the spectrum, from those groups you could say have an ideology or conservative or liberal, but also just all of the different charitable organizations that exist, religious and secular organizations that exist out there to help people that have a charitable or educational purpose. And it's about taking it public when necessary and fighting back that way. It's one of actually the most effective ways to fight back against these proposed IRS rules. And of course, political change, these are ultimately set by who is in charge of the federal agencies and trying to make these moves. So if you had, again, the right kind of administration in, the right kind of occupant in the White House, then this wouldn't get so far. There may be plenty of bureaucrats who would like to do it, but it wouldn't get to the point where it was even at the public commentary stage.
Let's grab another call. Last call of the segment.
Last call of the show today. Jody is calling from Iowa on line 5. Jody, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live. Thanks for calling.
Jody.
Hi. I'm just wondering, the candidates are talking about abolishing the IRS and other government agencies. Is that even possible?
Yep. If you get a flat tax or a fair tax, to simplify the Internal Revenue Code, which is impossible to deal with, I think you can reduce the IRS to a non-menacing agency. It would be a information agency, and it would just be a straightforward fair tax, flat tax. I'm a proponent more of the flat tax. I don't want value-added taxes, though. I think that's how you have to do. And I think at the end of the day, yes, we can. I think the IRS as an institution, as we know it, cannot continue to go this way. Period. End of discussion. Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast this week, folks. We have got incredible momentum with 2 major wins at the beginning of the year. Great way to start 2016. 2 big wins against the IRS. And this is where you come in. We have momentum for real change, and that is to change the IRS institutionally as we know it. We think you've got to stop the IRS abuse. We're winning that, but now it's time to end the IRS as an agency as we know it. And you can make a big difference there. We've got members of Congress that are working with us, but we need to hear from you. We've got a petition that's up at ACLJ.org. I want to encourage you to go to ACLJ.org or simply call us at 1-877-989-2255 and add your voice, add your name to hundreds of thousands of Americans that are calling for the same changes in our government. It's our government. It's we the people. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. Do it today. We'll talk to you next week.
The more we learn about the IRS scandal, the worse it gets. The American Center for Law and Justice is in federal court challenging the IRS scheme, targeting conservative groups simply because of their beliefs. Add to that an IRS that misuses millions of dollars of taxpayer funds, frivolous spending, unchecked and undocumented expenditures. All of that adds up to an IRS out of control. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
I really think the IRS is institutionally incapable of self-correcting. So the agency right now is in complete meltdown, in my view.
It's clear the IRS is incapable of doing its job. That's why the ACLJ believes it's time to implement real tax reform and end the IRS. Tell Congress to abolish the IRS. Add your name to our petition now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or you can add your name online. ACLJ.org.